So my journey here in Cotswold has come to an end. Me and Felicity will be leaving the Cotswold sadly, because it is a fantastic place. We've had a fantastic few days, seen some beautiful architecture, some beautiful buildings, experienced what life could have been like hundreds of years ago. Saw amazing sunsets and done a lot of driving. And I just think even though we've had a great visit, there are certainly things we could have done better. And if I could replan this trip, I definitely would. So I just want to say a few positives about Cotswold, some negatives, some recommendations I have after my few days here, and what I wish I could have done better, especially for planning the trip. Does Cotswold live up to its reputation of being like the heart of Britain, the beautiful countryside of England that just everyone goes on about? It's like you've got the city life of London, and then you've got just 2 hours out of London, this incredible countryside. In the sun, absolutely yes. In the rain, it just gets a little bit miserable and not so much fun. Today we were just kind of stuck in the car as we had heavy rain in July. Something you would expect more in the winter, but with UK weather, it's kind of unpredictable. We did get 2 fantastic days. But you've always got to be aware when you're planning this trip and booking this trip, is the English weather, is it going to allow you to do what you want? Hopefully it does, but there will be times where the weather is against you. The countryside is absolutely gorgeous. We didn't go on any hikes, but that would be one of the things I would change, is that we would actually spend more time hiking, or at least some time hiking, as we didn't actually do that this time. But I do want to visit again, and a hike would definitely be on my list of things to do. I'm from London. So hearing birds, being woken up by birds isn't a common thing that happens to me. However, it was very nice here, and Felicity also agreed that it was very nice to be woken up by the birds, as we are city people. We could get a very peaceful sleep here without the noise of the cars in London, the horns, the police sirens. So the sleeping, being able to get a nice peaceful sleep and really feeling relaxed in the countryside is definitely a positive here. A few things to be aware of before you come here is that you may struggle to get cell reception. In certain villages we got 0 cell reception, and even when we was outside in buildings we definitely got 0, but even outside of buildings it was a struggle. It was often going down to 3G, which just didn't work anyway, or it just went down to 0 bars. And that can be a problem if you are driving around, if you don't know the area very well like myself, and you're waiting to see you're waiting to see your sat-nav navigation load your way, and you're just kind of waiting in your car before that starts doing it. And then you're like, maybe I should start driving, and then I'll eventually pick up some cell reception and it will start loading, but then you don't really know where you're driving. So it can be a little bit of a wait whilst that happens. So it's something to be aware of that could interrupt your journey. However, if you're on a tour, that's not really going to be any problem at all. If you are driving here, there are some very narrow roads, and if you're not used to the narrow roads, it can be very daunting at times. The roads here are meant to be driven down very fast because it's the countryside, you don't have as much traffic. But then when these narrow roads get so thin and you come on into meets, it can certainly be an issue. As we were coming around one turn and I was going quite slowly, but I was a little bit in the middle of this thin road. But I was making sure I was going slow enough so that if something was to come around this corner, I could easily see it. And a car did happen to come around the corner very quickly, and I managed to adjust my position in time. But the old guy in the car coming onto me wasn't too happy and gave me the middle finger. But I was like, hey, he was in the middle of the road as well. So it's just blaming other people for mistakes that we were both making. But make sure you're being careful when driving around these areas, as they can be a bit tricky. Also, it is incredibly expensive. If you are trying to do this on a budget, you absolutely can. You can find cheap accommodation. Most of the accommodation we were looking at was a little bit over what we wanted to pay, but we figure this is peak time in July, so we're going to have to pay a little bit more. There were some cheaper options, but they didn't look as good. I mean, we saw places that were up to £2,000 a night, which is way out of our budget. And also, when you're just walking around, you're looking at the restaurants. A lot of restaurants are more expensive than London. So coming from London, I'm used to, say, paying £10 a meal for something in a nice restaurant. Here it's like £15 a meal for the exact same meal. Even though the meal is fantastic, it does feel like it's a little more expensive than London. And when everyone's like, London's one of the most expensive cities in the world, it's like, well, Cotswold is a little bit more expensive sometimes, it feels. However, you can do it cheaper. There were lots of options for, say, like fish and chips, and you can just maybe take those to go and sit on the green and say somewhere like Bourton on the Water. But if you didn't want to always eat fish and chips and you wanted maybe a slightly a different option because you've eaten that so much already, then it does start to, the price does start to get a little bit more. You can go to supermarkets and find your own food as well, of course, but then you're not maybe getting the experience you want. Maybe the experience you're looking for is to eat local cuisine in taverns or pubs or bars, but it's just a little bit too expensive. And that really did surprise me. I wasn't expecting it to be as expensive as it was, considering I was outside of London. But maybe that's just what I don't know, and I didn't realize that actually it's not London that's expensive, it's just pretty much the whole of England that's expensive. So when you're budgeting for your trip, be aware of what it is you're going to eat and what sacrifices you may have to eat, or plan in your budget to make eating the most expensive part of your budget, as that's most likely what will happen. So I feel like I could have planned this trip a little bit better, especially certain days. We figured we wouldn't really get to see that many villages, but we got to see more than we thought, as certain places are very small. Say like Castle Combe, we was only there for like an hour and a half, and we kind of thought, why are we still here? We could just leave and go see somewhere else, because we had seen it, taken our photos, made a video, and then we were just kind of waiting for things to open, thinking we might eat there, but we was like, we've got an opportunity to go. So a lot of these villages are very small, and you don't need to worry about how long you're going to spend there, especially the small villages like Castle Combe and the Slaughters. But then when you get to bigger cities, there is a lot more to see. And I wasn't so prepared for that, as when we went to, say, Bourton on the Water, I wasn't aware of how much was there, as we wasn't planning on visiting there originally. So I didn't really make a video there. I've got some clips of myself there, but then I didn't realize how much was there, and then realized the video wasn't complete, as I didn't see enough of the locations, and I didn't know if I could talk about the locations I haven't seen. It just felt like it wouldn't be the best video. We also feel like we missed out on certain opportunities, what is probably going to be a once in the lifetime trip. Because even if we come back to the Cotswold, we would want to see different villages, not necessarily the same ones, which means we missed out on seeing certain things that we would have wanted to if we had just planned it before. And when we did go to Bourton on the Water, we should have gone there very early in the morning, because it was insanely busy, and we couldn't, say, get the photos we wanted. And this is nothing common. This isn't a bad thing. This is obviously what we expect. We expect tourist places to be busy, but we should have gone there early in the morning instead of going to the Slaughters in the morning. And these three are very good to do on the same day. If you were to go to Bourton on the Water, you can spend the morning there, take some photos, maybe spend half a day there and have lunch there, and then after lunch you could go to the Slaughters. And you'd only be there for a few hours before you can either go somewhere else in the evening or go back to your hotel. So that's what I would do differently, is really think about maybe going to the bigger towns first. I'm a very early riser. We like to go to places early. We like to drive early. So I'd go to the bigger towns first, take some photos and enjoy them, and go to the smaller towns later. We were at Castle Combe very early. That might be the one exception, as it's extremely popular, but the other ones you can definitely see the bigger towns first. And the same, we was also in Cirencester. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I might be mispronouncing it, but apparently the capital of the Cotswold. It's very close to Kemble, so we thought we could just go there on our last day in the evening. But then when we got there, we saw that it was really big, a fantastic church. And then when we was looking around, we realized that actually there's a lot to do here. And after starting the video, we realized there's actually too much to do here, that we can't make the video we wanted. Which would be, again, that actually we would have gone there earlier in the morning, and we would have done Kemble, which we've done in the morning. We would have done that later. But this is how things go, so I would make changes of going to the bigger towns first and then going to the smaller villages in the afternoon, as they're not so busy. Depending on how much time you're spending here also depends on what it is you can do. We were here for 3 nights and we pretty much just spent the time going to different villages. However, I would also replan it to spend 2 days doing villages and 1 day doing a hike. It's also kind of like once you've seen one village, you've kind of seen them all. And once you've seen 2 villages, it's like how many more do you want to see? You can always get fantastic pictures in every new village you go. I would just say Broadway Tower is maybe the most unique out of all of them. It's the only one that would be slightly different to all the rest, but they all have fantastic picturesque cottages and small houses and maybe a river with a bridge. And once you've seen one, you've kind of seen them all. It's just different. It's just the same picture slightly differently in a different location. So you don't need to spend too much time going around all the villages unless that's your aim, to see all of them. So I would also say just 1 day seeing some villages, maybe even say like Bourton on the Water and then to the Slaughters, and then the next day doing a hike if you're only here for say 2 days. If you are here for 1 day, then you could easily just spend some time in a small village and go for a hike as well. You don't even need to sleep over here to get the experience that you would want. You could definitely drive to somewhere, pay your parking for an entire day, experience a small town, get some lunch, go for a hike, and then drive back home in the afternoon or on to your new location. I would recommend spending more here than 1 day. I would definitely recommend a few nights, but depending on if this is your one and only trip you're ever going to do to the UK, you probably don't want to spend too much time in the Cotswold, as there's plenty of things to see all over the country. You could definitely just do it in 1 day where you would see one village, you would get the idea and do one hike and then move on. It's absolutely fine to get the experience that you would want. The longer the experience goes, just the better it is and the more chance you would have of spending here with good weather. I always recommend waking up extremely early. Getting to the locations first, especially the popular towns, is probably vital, especially if you're there for pictures. If you're not there for pictures, it's not actually that important. But if you are someone who likes to take photographs in these places or make videos, then waking up at the crack of dawn and being the first person there to take these pictures is highly recommended. When it has been sunny, I have suffered massively with hay fever. So to my fellow hay fever sufferers, make sure you're managing to deal with that okay. I wasn't dealing with it very well. I was taking the 1 a day tablets and I was suffering a lot, and I had been taking them for about 5 days before we got here as well. There's a lot in the summertime, there's a lot of pollen around, so hay fever sufferers, try to protect yourself the best you can. So I absolutely do think the Cotswold is worth visiting. It is a very beautiful place. It's a very peaceful place. You can just sit down and relax in many of the villages and just feel like the stress can just be taken away from you, if you have stress, of course. I would say Castle Combe is a great place, but it's certainly nothing that it's certainly not a place you have to spend a huge amount of time. You can do that in a very short time. We also went to Tetbury, which is very close to Castle Combe, but unfortunately my hay fever at that time was not going so well, so we had to I had to leave that area to try and get my hay fever under control. But it was certainly doing Castle Combe and Tetbury in the same day was fantastic. That would be a great trip to do. If you are here for 1 day, then you can get the small village and the slightly bigger town in one setting, and it's a very good combination. The same with the Slaughters and Bourton on the Water. I would say make sure you know exactly what places you want to see, go to the busier places first and then go to the not so busy places later. You could also go to the busy places first and then see the smaller places and come back for lunch. Absolutely doable as well. Getting around the Cotswold is easy by car. There are taxi services here, there are a lot of taxi services here, but I can imagine if you were always taking taxis, you're going to build up quite a bill. If money isn't an issue, then that's not a problem. However, for other people, if you can't drive or get the taxis, it is going to be a bit more difficult. There are tours around here, so you can go on them. Some of the more outer places like the Slaughters are going to be a little bit more difficult to get to, and they may not be on the tours, so you may have to not go to them, which is fine because I'm sure you'll see fantastic places on the tours. But other than that, you definitely can't walk around. You can certainly try to walk around, but you would need a much longer time. Maybe you're here for like a few days and you can do hikes during the day. But that's a completely different trip to what I was doing. hiking is something I do highly recommend though. And unfortunately, I do think it's just that cars are the way to go here. If you're not driving and you're not on a tour, it's going to be more difficult to get around. Some of the hotels will offer to pick you up from train stations, which is very kind, but then you're kind of stuck in that one location unless you're getting taxis to locations. So driving is optimal for this trip. However, you can experience this trip on day trips. If you do come in by train to experience a small town, go for a hike, and you can go home on the train in the same day. Anyway, I hope this helps you plan your journey to the Cotswold better. I've had a fantastic time here, even though I feel like I could have planned it better and I could have had better photographs and better videos, but I've still thoroughly enjoyed my experience here, and I will come back. I am someone who always wants to see new locations, so I won't be going to the same villages, but there are certainly more places here that I haven't seen that I would love to see. And I hope you guys have a fantastic time if you do come here. But anyway, that's all I've got to say about Cotswold, and I'll be seeing this place again at some point in the future. Anyway, as we say in England, see you later.